Hi, this is National Master Dan Heisman, and we're here with another video to help you improve your chess. Let me move this out of the way of the picture here. All right, so today we're going to talk about a subject that often confuses people, which is when are you looking for checks, captures, and threats? Checks, captures, and threats are the three types of forcing moves in chess, and they're the moves that initiate tactics. But if someone says to me, I'm looking for a threat, or I'm looking to see if I have a threat or he has a threat, they get confused as to what ply they're talking about. So let's start out by telling everybody what's a ply. A ply is a half a move. If white plays e4 on the first move and black plays e5, that's one move of the game, but it's two ply. Each move is a ply, and when we measure how deep a computer's looking, we usually measure it in ply. So if the computer says my depth is 24, that means 12 moves for each player, or 24 ply. So when you're thinking, it's your move, but which plies are you thinking about? You're actually thinking about at least 3 different plies to start with. The first ply you're thinking about is your opponent's previous move. He might have made threats or done a check or a capture. So you're looking at the previous move to see what's going on. Then when you're looking for your own candidate moves, if you're looking for tactics, you want to look for your own checks, captures, or threats that you could play. Finally, in order to see if your move is safe, you can't look at your opponent's previous move or your current move. You have to look at your opponent's next move. So what you have to do is say, if I make this move, what are all my opponent's dangerous checks, captures, and threats that he could make on the next move? And would I safely be able to meet those threats on my next move? That last step is the most important step. It's the one that if you don't do, your opponent can make a check, capture, or threat that you can't meet. And then you say, uh-oh, what do I do now? And then it's too late because maybe the threat is unstoppable. So if you don't do that, if you don't check to see if your opponent's reply to your move could be a check, capture, or threat that you can't meet, then you're playing hope chess. Why do I call it hope chess? Because if you make a move and then your opponent plays a check, capture, or threat that you didn't anticipate, then you go, uh-oh, and you hope that you can meet it. If you're lucky, maybe you can meet it and you're okay. If you're unlucky or you really are not that good, then your opponent makes unstoppable threats and then it's all over. You can't stop the threats and the game's over. So let's pick a sample game. I picked kind of a random game here out of my database on Lichess. I picked the game Krogius against Stein, Leonid Stein from 1960. So let's follow a couple moves and let's just do what I just said as an example. So it's black's move. Right now, we won't worry about white's previous move because then we have to keep going back. Let's just start with our current move. Does black have any checks, captures, or threats? Well, he can capture a2 with the bishop on e6, but that's not a threat. White has it adequately guarded. Are there any other checks, captures, and threats? He can play knight takes e4, but again, that square, according to our safety table, is very safely guarded with the f3 pawn and the knight on c3. So black has no dangerous checks, captures in this position. Does he have any threats? Well, he could play some moves that might threaten things. Maybe he could threaten the knight on b4 by moving his d-pawn, and that's exactly what he does. In the game, Grandmaster Stein plays d5. So this is a threat. Why is it a threat? Because the bishop on f8 can now capture the knight on b4. So let's flip the board around. And now we'll look at it from white's point of view. Let's take the arrows off the board. So it's white's turn and he has to ask himself, what is my opponent threatening? Well, he's threatening at the very least bishop takes b4. So we have to stop that threat. What are some of the ways we could stop that threat? Well, we can capture the pawn on d5. We can capture it 3 different ways. We can't capture with the queen because we lose material. But if we capture with the pawn, then we're counterattacking his bishop. So we could calculate that. If we play e takes d5, if black then plays bishop takes b4, then we could play d takes e6. And if he plays bishop takes c3, we could play e takes f7 check. So that might be possible to take with a pawn. We'd have to calculate that more carefully. But what we're doing now is we're looking at our own defenses to the threat of bishop takes b4. Now, obviously, we could take on d5 with a knight. We could take with either knight. If we take with the knight on c3 and he takes our knight on b4, we could take back with the knight on d5. So taking with either knight might be safe. How many times does white have that square attacked? It's attacked 4 times. Our safety table says white is attacking that pawn with 2 knights, a pawn, and a queen. Black's only guarding it with a knight, a bishop, and a queen, so it looks like black's losing a pawn. But of course, black has some things in mind that he's going to do on the next couple moves. So white says, okay, well, I have to save my knight, and as long as I can win that pawn, I may as well win the pawn. So if I take that pawn, what are all his checks, captures, and threats? Well, it depends on how you take it. But in the game, he took it with the b knight, the one that's attacked by the bishop on f8. And now we have to look for black's checks, captures, and threats. Well, now black does have a check. Black has bishop to c5 check. So we have to look out for that to make sure that that's not a dangerous check. And we have to look out for that before we play knight on b takes d5. I'm just making the move on the board so you can follow along. So white would have to make sure that bishop c5 check is not a winning move. But if black plays bishop c5 check, it looks like white can just play king to h1, and at least for the moment he's safe. So let's flip the board again and look at it from black's point of view. Okay, black has just lost a pawn. What good is that? Well, if you're looking at Stockfish's analysis up there on the upper right, you can see that Stockfish says that black's pawn sacrifice is actually not quite sound, that white is ahead by 1.4. But of course you have to play the game and there's a lot of play left here. So Stein has something in mind with this. And what he does is he looks for his own checks, captures, and threats, and he plays bishop to c5 check. And of course white now sees his opponent's previous move as a check. The only safe way to get out of that check is to play king to h1. So there's not much to look at on this ply. You have to look at king h1 and say, if king h1 loses, then I'm in trouble because all the other moves clearly lose too. So he does play king to h1. And now if you're black, you're looking and saying, oh good, he has previous checks, captures, or threats. Does king h1 create any of those? And the answer is no, king h1 is not a check, it's not a capture, and it doesn't really make a threat. In fact, it just replies to our check. So from looking on the previous move, there's not a lot of things to worry about. But black, of course, has sacrificed a pawn for this idea. So what can he do now? And what black now sees is a pattern that he could do in 3 or 4 moves, which is to set up some sort of checkmate by playing knight h5, followed by knight g3 check, then h takes g3 would be forced. Black could play f takes g3, and that would threaten queen h4 checkmate. So that's his idea. He's going to make those threats, and he's going to say to white, how are you going to stop me? Even though my move is not a threat, it's threatening to threaten. What would you do about it? So he plays knight to h5, and the computer says he has nothing better. All right, now if you're white, you can't wait till black plays knight g3 check and then go, uh-oh, I thought that was not safe because I could just take it with the pawn. You have to realize that if black plays knight to g3 check and you take it with a pawn, which is your only legal move, then when black takes back, he's threatening mate in 1, and by then it may be too late to stop the mate. So what you have to do now is you have to react to what would happen if knight g3 check, h takes g, f takes g. You have to have a move for that, because if you wait till you get there, that would be hope chess. So let's show you an idea of hope chess. Let's say white says, oh, I'll just guard my pawn on b5 with a4, and black plays knight checks, pawn takes, pawn takes. How would you stop queen h4 check now? You could play bishop g5 to temporarily stop it, but then I'll just take it off. What else could white do? Well, he really has no moves here. It's going to be the end of the game. So if you wait too long and your opponent makes one of these checks, captures, or threats, and you're not anticipating it, and play hope chess, now you would hope that there's a way out of this, but there isn't. This is an unstoppable threat, as the engine confirms. So if we go back, white can't play a move like a4. He has to play a move on the board that would stop knight g3 check, h takes g, f takes g, followed by queen h4 mate. And that's exactly what Grandmaster Krogius does. Of course, he sees that. He's a grandmaster. So he plays queen to e1. Why does he play queen to e1? Well, he plays queen e1 because he sees on knight g3 check, h takes g3, f takes g3, he can now play queen takes g3, and that would not only stop the mate, but it would win a pawn and completely stop queen h4 together. So what should Grandmaster Stein do? Well, of course, Grandmaster Stein anticipated that this might be something he could play. So he goes ahead and he says, do I have any checks, captures, or threats? Well, he can't play queen h4 because of queen takes h4. But he still can play knight g3 check with the idea that he can threaten to take the pawn on g3 and mate, even though it would take him an extra tempo. So that's what he does. He plays knight g3 check. Well, if you're white, any things that you're thinking about doing now had to be on the previous move, because now he has no choice. If he takes with the queen, he loses his queen for a knight after queen takes g3, f takes g3. So he has to take with the pawn, and then he says, what's Grandmaster Stein up to? Because if he takes back, I'm going to take with the queen. So now black needs a key move here to try to get some threats going. So what should he play? Well, he could play queen to g5, which threatens to play queen to h5, and that's going to be mate. So that's what he does. He plays queen to g5. And now white has to say, how do I stop queen h5 check from being mate? Queen g5 was a threat. It's threatening to mate with queen h5. White now has to look at his own checks, captures, and threats to see what he can do about stopping the threat of queen h5 check. So he's going to look at a move like g4 to guard that square, and after g4, both the h5 square and the h4 square are guarded, and he's going to say to Grandmaster Stein, what are you thinking about doing after that move? So he plays g4, and now black needs a way to continue this attack, and I have a feeling he's going to do it by more sacrifices. And indeed he does. He plays h5, threatening to take the pawn on g4, and that would open up not only the threat of queen h5 check, but also the threat of queen h6 check, now that the h file would become open. Clearly white can't capture with g takes h5, because queen takes h5 will lead to mate in a couple. So he has to play a move, and the engine says his only move to stop these threats is g3, which also takes advantage of the fact that the f4 pawn is pinned to the queen by the bishop on c1. So he plays the best and only move. Grandmaster Krogius plays g3, and he's winning, but things are still complicated. This gives his king the g2 square, which is very important. So Stein captures on g4, and at this point I'm not going to keep going through the checks, captures, and threats. We'll just go through the rest of the game just so you can see what happened. White is up by 2.0, but it's still very complicated, and black has some good threats here. So let's see what happens. White plays the best move, king g2. Black brings his last piece into the attack, rook on a to f8. Now all his pieces are sort of pointed toward the king side. Here, white should play rook h1. You can see the green arrow, which is pointing to the king side to make sure that he's guarding some of those key squares. Instead, Krogius tries to get his last pieces into the game with bishop d2. Now the engine says black's attack is good for at least a draw. Black plays queen h6, and the engine says, oh, I don't like that. White should just play f takes g4 or rook h1, especially f takes g4, and be up by 2.4. He plays kind of the obvious move, rook h1. Black blocks the attack by playing queen to g7. White takes the pawn. Engine says bishop to d1 was the best move. Black takes back. Now the engine says white should play knight a4 and try to get rid of that dangerous bishop. He plays rook to d1. Black plays g5. White plays e5. Now it says black has a draw if he plays g takes f3 check. Black instead takes the pawn with the queen. The engine says, oh, that's a big mistake. Krogius can play bishop d3 and he's winning. Of course, engines these days are a lot better than the grandmasters are. But poor Mr. Krogius plays f takes g4. Black sacks his queen to get a fork of the queen and get his piece back. Now black's ahead by 0.6. White goes to trade, but that's a losing move. The engine says the best move was bishop to e1 to stop rook f2 check. And now just bishop takes g4. Knight e4, too late. Bishop h3 check, winning the exchange. Winning the exchange doesn't mean you come out ahead in a trade. It means you get a rook for a bishop or a knight. A lot of my new students, when I ask them, what does it mean to win the exchange? They say, oh, you get a higher piece for a lower piece. But of course, that's not really what it means. That's what it means in English. But in chess, when you win the exchange, it just means you're winning a rook for a bishop or a knight. King h2. Rook takes f1. Black's winning. Bishop takes f1. Knight takes. Rook checks, picks up the bishop. Hits the other bishop. Takes the bishop and hits the knight. The knight takes the pawn. White's only chances are those dangerous passed pawns. Bishop h3 starting to set up a mating net. a4 trying to get the pawns rolling. Rook checks. King goes in the corner to prevent a discovered attack. Knight f6 threatening knight g4 and then knight f2 checkmate. a5, knight g4 threatening checkmate. Knight e4 to guard knight f2 checkmate. Rook e2 with a double threat of rook takes e4 and rook e1 checkmate, and white resigns. Okay, so let's review what we said because it's really important. You don't just say, I'm looking for checks, captures, and threats. When your opponent makes a move, you can easily see if it's a check or a capture. But you also have to ask, what are all the things that my opponent is doing with that move, including all the threats? So you're looking for threats from the previous move. You don't really have to look for checks or captures from the previous move because they're well defined. And if he captured something, you should know he captured it. And if he checks you, you certainly must know that you're in check. But you also have to look for any threats that he's making on the next move. Then if it's your move and you want to do something tactically yourself and do something positive, you're looking for your checks, captures, and threats on your move. And finally, and maybe most importantly, if you have a candidate move, a move that you're thinking of playing, you have to ask yourself, if I play this move, what are all his dangerous checks, captures, and threats on the next move? And can I meet them on my next move? Because if you can't, then the game may be over. It might be an unstoppable threat. You can't allow those. So checks, captures, and threats isn't just something generic. It occurs by looking at what's happening on the previous move, what's happening on your move, your next ply, and what's happening on the following ply, which is your opponent's move. Checks, captures, and threats are not just one concept for one level of ply. It's something that involves your opponent's previous move, your current move, and possibly dangers from your opponent's replies to your current move. Okay, hope that all makes sense. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, you can subscribe. You can also like the channel, but the best thing you can do is please tell your friends about my channel, Dan Heisman Chess. See you next time. Thanks. Bye.